In the Learning Transformation Breakfast this morning, I was really talking about a learning culture to enhance agility and performance in organisations.
One of the key things for me was around how does the learning function enable people to learn but not get in the way of that learning. So how do you let go and create the culture and the environment and trust people to get on and use it and to work with it? That for me was probably the biggest single thing that came across.
In this digital world is we need to help people learn to learn in digital workplaces. An example by that is very often people learn differently at home. At home people are very often quite open-minded to using YouTube or Google, but as soon as they get to the workplace they want to sit in a classroom. So how do you change that culture? How do you teach people to learn and have the growth mindset in this digital world?
I think the thing that's important for us as L&D and HR professionals is to stop thinking about ourselves as being the controllers and the governance around everything and actually the creators of everything, and start to think of ourselves as being facilitators of what needs to happen. Of course we're still going to create some content and there's going to be things that we might recommend and highlight and things like that, but it really is an impossible task to say we're going to do that individually for every person.
It's certainly the idea of communities, is how do we learn from one another. If I again look at O2, the biggest resource that we have not yet tapped into are our own people. You know, there's a wealth of knowledge that sit within the workforce and your employees, and I think a challenge is how do you tap into those. And we often talk about social learning. I like to talk about how do we socialize learning, how do you make it ubiquitous, how do you help people recognize the value of learning from one another.
That one of the preconditions for a learning culture is trust. So you have to build a high trust organisation, and many organisations don't have high trust, and when you don't have high trust you have high fear. People protect themselves, and therefore if you're in the business of survival and self-protection, you are not going to share, you're not going to be generous, you're not going to collaborate, you're going to make sure you're okay. So to create those sharing and collaborative environments, high trust is critical.
But I think it's really exciting, it's really empowering, and it means that we can have an exponential impact on the growth of the business and the impact that we have within there.
I think a watch out is certainly what I've experienced is we overthink it, we make it super complicated. Instead of just going, hang on, let's just get the basics right, and once the basics are right, everything else should follow from there.
And I believe really strongly that a learning culture is one of the key differentiators in this century between successful organisations and organisations that are destined always to struggle.